You hear them before you see them. The clatter of iron chains dragging across cobblestone. The exhausted breathing of women walking in columns through streets still smoky from cannon fire. Their hands are bound. Their faces are blank with shock. Behind them, the city burns. Ahead of them stretches a road they cannot see the end of. And at the end of that road, something waits that none of them can yet imagine. This is the moment after conquest. The moment when the battlefield falls silent and a different kind of war begins. Before we go deeper, drop a comment. I'm genuinely curious where in the world you're watching this from. It still amazes me that a story buried in 16th century archives can reach someone across oceans and centuries, right now, on their phone. This is the Ottoman Empire at the height of its power. The year is 1526, just after the Battle of Mohacs. The Hungarian kingdom has collapsed. Tens of thousands of soldiers lie dead in the mud. But the Ottoman commanders are not looking at corpses. They are looking at the women left behind, the wives of knights, nobles, infantry officers, women who woke up that morning as respected members of their communities and will go to sleep tonight, if they sleep at all, as something else entirely. Property, sabaya, spoils of war. What the Ottomans did to these women was not random cruelty. It was not the chaos of battle spilling over into brutality. It was a system, a legal, bureaucratic, meticulously documented machine designed to strip identity, sever bloodlines, and reshape entire populations. And the most terrifying part? It worked. The process began within hours of victory. Specialized officers moved through the captured streets with ledgers and ink. They were not looters. They were clerks. Their job was to separate people with surgical precision. Men to one side, execution or enslavement. Children to another. Future soldiers, future servants. And the women? They were divided again, by age, by beauty, by fertility. This was not about lust. This was economics. Empire building through flesh and womb. Ottoman physicians entered the holding areas and performed inspections that stripped away every shred of dignity. They checked teeth like horses at auction. They examined bodies for scars, illness, strength. A woman's value was calculated in real time. Young, attractive, healthy, marked for Constantinople. Older, plain, or weak. Condemned to labor camps or left to die on the roadside. Noble women, wives of commanders, daughters of magistrates, received no special treatment. In fact, their humiliation was often more deliberate. Because when a society watches its elite women reduced to cattle, it understands that resistance is futile. There are records of this. Ottoman tax documents listing women by name, age, origin, and price. Ledgers where a Hungarian noblewoman is valued at 40 akçe and a Serbian peasant girl at 15. Human beings converted into numbers, filed in imperial archives, cross-referenced for taxation. The bureaucracy of horror. The journey to the slave markets could take weeks. Long columns of captives, chained at the wrists and ankles, were forced to march across mountain passes and river valleys. They walked through the ruins of their own villages. Some collapsed from exhaustion and were left where they fell. Others gave birth on the road and watched their infants taken away before the umbilical cord was even cut. The Ottoman escorts did not see this as cruelty. They saw it as logistics, moving inventory. When they finally arrived, Constantinople, Bursa, Edirne, the markets were waiting. These were not shadowy back alleys. They were official state institutions, regulated and taxed. Women stood on raised platforms while buyers circled. They were touched, prodded, examined. A merchant might ask a woman to show her hands to check for calluses. Another might demand she recite phrases in Turkish to test her obedience. If she hesitated, she was struck. If she wept, her price dropped. The market rewarded compliance and punished memory. Behind each transaction stood a scribe. He recorded everything. Name, often changed on the spot. Origin, Hungary, Serbia, Wallachia. Skills, weaving, cooking, singing. Price, negotiated, stamped, finalized. These women entered the empire's records as objects. They exited their old lives as ghosts. But the markets were not the darkest destination. That honor belonged to the harem, We have been taught to imagine the harem as a place of silk and luxury, of forbidden romance and intrigue. That is a lie. The harem was a prison. Inside the Topkapi palace, thousands of women from every corner of the conquered world were held in rooms they could not leave, under the watch of eunuch guards who ensured no word, no letter, no whisper ever reached the outside. These women were given new names, stripped of their languages, forced to adopt Ottoman Turkish, forced to memorize Quranic verses, forced to forget their mothers' faces. Refusal was not tolerated. A Christian woman who clung to her faith might be locked in a windowless cell for days without food. A woman who spoke her native tongue might be beaten in front of the others as a lesson. The harem did not want rebels. It wanted blank slates, and it got them, slowly, methodically, through hunger, isolation, and the unbearable weight of knowing that no one was coming to save you. The women inside competed for survival, not for love, for survival. A smile from the Sultan could mean protection. A night in his chambers could mean your children would be fed. Rejection meant obscurity, abuse, or death. Some women descended into madness. Others took their own lives, choosing a death of their own design over a life dictated by men they would never know and could never escape. And what of the wives of the defeated commanders? The women married to the knights who died at Mohacs, the officers who fell defending their cities? Their punishment was sharper still. They were often assigned to serve the very Ottoman officers who had killed their husbands, forced to pour wine, to prepare meals, to endure the presence of the men who had destroyed everything they loved. This was not accidental. It was policy. The message was clear. Nobility means nothing. Bloodlines mean nothing. Resistance ends in submission. Some were paraded, dragged through the streets of Constantinople in chains displayed before crowds as proof of Ottoman dominance. A Hungarian countess, once draped in velvet and jewels, now walked barefoot through the mud while soldiers jeered. Her humiliation was not private, it was theater. A performance designed to break not just her, but everyone watching. If she could be reduced to this, anyone could. Then came the children. Because the Ottomans understood something that other empires missed. Control the womb, control the future. Any child born to an enslaved woman automatically belonged to the master. A mother had no legal claim to her own son or daughter. She could raise the child, nurse it, sing to it, but she could never call it hers. And one day, without warning, that child would be taken, sold, reassigned, erased. Boys born in the harem system were often funneled into the Janissary Corps, elite soldiers trained from childhood to serve the Sultan. They were taught to forget their mothers, their origins, their blood. A Hungarian woman's son might grow up to lead an army that conquered Hungary. The cruelty was fractal. It reproduced itself across generations. Girls born into slavery became the next generation of concubines. The cycle was endless. A grandmother enslaved in 1526 might have a granddaughter enslaved in 1570, neither of them ever tasting freedom, neither of them ever knowing a life outside the machine. And then there was conversion. Forced, ritualized, weaponized. Captive Christian women were dragged into mosques and made to recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. It did not matter if they believed. It did not matter if they understood the words. What mattered was the act itself. Once converted, a woman could not return home. Her church would not recognize her. Her family would not take her back. Conversion was a severing, a legal and spiritual death that ensured even if she escaped, she would have nowhere to go. Some resisted. They whispered prayers in their native tongues when the guards weren't listening. They taught their children fragments of songs their own mothers had sung. They scratched crosses into the walls of their cells where no one would see. These small acts of defiance were all they had. And when they were discovered, the punishment was swift. Public whippings, starvation, isolation. The empire could not allow memory to survive. There are letters, hidden in archives across Europe. Letters from women who managed, against impossible odds, to send word home. One, written in 1529 by a Serbian noblewoman sold into a harem in Bursa, describes watching her daughter being taken away at age 7. "I have forgotten my name," she writes. but I have not forgotten hers. The letter was found sewn into the lining of a trader's coat decades later. It never reached her family. Another account, from a Venetian diplomat stationed in Constantinople, describes walking past a market and seeing a woman he recognized, a duchess from a court he had visited years before. He tried to approach her. She looked at him with empty eyes and turned away. He wrote in his journal, "She is alive, but she is not living." The scale of this system is staggering. Historians estimate that between 1453 and 1600, tens of thousands of women from the Balkans, Eastern Europe, and the Caucasus were absorbed into Ottoman slavery. Entire villages lost their female populations. Entire bloodlines were erased. The demographic impact lasted for centuries. Some regions never recovered their population balance. And yet, for all its horror, the system was legal. It was codified in Islamic jurisprudence as practiced by the Ottomans. Judges upheld it. Scribes documented it. The state taxed it. This was not rogue violence. This was civilization. At least that is what the empire called it. The irony is almost unbearable. The Ottomans built mosques, universities, libraries. They patronized poets and architects. They prided themselves on justice and order. And at the same time, they perfected a machine that turned human beings into property with ruthless efficiency. Both things were true. Both things were Ottoman. Some women did escape. There are scattered records of ransoms paid, bribes made, desperate rescues organized by family members who sold everything they owned to buy back a daughter or sister. But even those who made it home carried scars that never healed. They could not speak of what had happened. Their communities did not want to hear it, so they lived in silence, ghosts among the living, carrying memories too painful to share and too heavy to forget. The Ottomans exported this model. Other Islamic states watched and learned. The harems of Persia, the slave markets of North Africa, many adopted similar systems, refining the bureaucracy of exploitation. What the Ottomans built became a template, and that template outlived the empire itself. But here's the part that history struggles to hold, the part that archives cannot fully capture. What happened to the women who disappeared completely? The ones who were not sold, not recorded, not remembered. The ones who were taken into rooms no scribe ever entered and never came out. Their names are not in the ledgers. Their fates are not in the letters. They vanished into silence so absolute that even their ghosts left no trace. And perhaps that is the darkest truth of all. Not the cruelty we can document, but the cruelty we cannot. The suffering so complete it left no record. The women so thoroughly erased that we do not even know how many there were. The wives of defeated warriors did not die on the battlefield. They died slowly, in chains, in markets, in harems, in rooms no one remembers. And when they finally stopped breathing, the empire moved on. The scribes closed their ledgers. The markets opened the next day. The machine kept running. History calls this conquest. The women who lived it had no word for what it was. Because there is no word. There is only the echo. The faint, persistent echo of voices that were silenced before they could scream. And that echo is still here. In the archives. In the letters sewn into coat linings. In the empty spaces where names should be. It does not ask for justice. It does not ask for revenge. It only asks to be heard. So we listen, because if we do not, the silence wins.